The day I ended Principal Mark Ellison's career started like any other: coffee gone cold in the microwave, a crusty-eyed cat meowing at absolutely nothing, and a PDA email thread that made me want to chew drywall. But let me rewind. This all started because my daughter got suspended for doing the right thing. 12 years old, and she already has more courage than half the spineless adults on our school board. Malia recorded a classmate calling another girl the N-word. She took it straight to the assistant principal. She thought she was helping. Instead, she got suspended for violating privacy. That's a direct quote. Meanwhile, the racist kid got a counseling referral and a juice box. When I showed up at the hearing, Principal Ellison greeted me with a smile like melted plastic. "You know the kind. We appreciate your concern, Ms. Holloway, but I think your emotions are clouding your judgment." Emotions. Clouding. Judgment. I wanted to lunge across that desk and rearrange his veneers. Instead, I breathed deeply. I thanked him for his time. I took my daughter's hand and walked out of that office like a woman in a courtroom drama about to crack the case wide open. Because here's what Principal Glossy Veneers didn't know. I'm not just a library aide. Before I dropped to part-time to care for my kids, I ran a nonprofit that specialized in data auditing for public systems. Education, criminal justice, housing. I know how to follow the money. I know how to connect the dots. And more importantly, I know how to bide my time. That night, while the school's board of directors probably sipped Chardonnay over talk of renovations and fundraisers, I opened my laptop and began to dig. The school had to publish discipline reports quarterly. It took 3 clicks to get the PDFs. I ran the numbers. Guess what? If your kid is white, they're 4 times less likely to be suspended than if they're black. 5 times if your kid is mixed race, like mine. Girls of color? 7 times. And guess who signed off on every one of those reports? Principal Mark Ellison. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I highlighted. I sorted. I built a beautiful spreadsheet in rage-fueled silence with column headers like violation, student demographic, and punishment disparity index. I made pivot tables that would make a Harvard statistician weep. Then I printed them. In color. On glossy paper. Because if I was going to raise hell, it was going to be visually compelling. The next board meeting was in a week. And while my kid served a suspension for trying to stop racism, I wrote my speech. I wore red lipstick. And I rehearsed in my kitchen like a woman preparing to light the match. They called me emotional. They had no idea how right they were. You ever watch a person's soul leave their body in slow motion? Because that's what happened at the next school board meeting. I arrived early. I wore heels that click like power and a blazer that says, "I've read the bylaws and I'm here to weaponize them." Malia's suspension was still on my mind, but it had crystallized into something colder, not sadness. Strategy. The meeting room was the usual sterile rectangle, fluorescent lights buzzing like a dying wasp nest. Parents filled the rows, most of them looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. There was a guy next to me explaining what kombucha was to his wife. I don't think she asked. Mark Ellison sat at the head of the table, relaxed, smug, nodding like the king of the castle. He had on that navy suit he always wears when he wants to look approachable. Side note, it gives him a neck roll. You'd think someone with a $120,000 salary would discover tailoring. The moment the floor opened for public comment, I stood. I started calm, measured. "Good evening. My name is Grace Holloway. I'm the mother of a 6th grade student at Brookridge Academy." Mark gave me a tight smile. He thought this was going to be about my daughter. He had no idea I was about to detonate a truth grenade. "I'm here to address a pattern of racial and gender-based disparities in the school's disciplinary policies. Over the past 3 years, Black and biracial girls have received suspensions at a rate 7 times higher than their white peers." A murmur spread through the room. I heard someone shift in their seat. Kombucha man stopped talking. I passed copies of my printed analysis to the board members like I was serving up hot plates of shame. Full-color graphs. Anonymized case studies. Quotes pulled from policy memos Mark had signed, some of them with little gems like emotional volatility and not conducive to a harmonious environment. All used to describe 12-year-old girls. All girls of color. I'd also like to note, I continued, that in the past 2 years, 5 teachers of color have either been pushed out or reassigned after filing complaints. And of those, 2 were given non-disclosure agreements in exchange for silence. I have documentation. Would you like copies? I smiled sweetly, the way my mother taught me when offering someone tea before I destroy them. Mark's smile had vanished. His posture changed a little too stiff. His hand gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white. He opened his mouth. "Thank you, Miss Holloway," he said, voice clipped. "Your concerns have been noted." Noted, I echoed, eyes locked with his. Noted is what you write next to a speeding ticket. I'm here for change. I sat down. No yelling. No drama. Just a clear, undeniable mirror to the system they were too comfortable to question. That night, I emailed the full report to 3 local education reporters, the County School Equity Task Force, and a certain podcast I knew was hungry for exactly this kind of content. Mark Ellison's PR mask had started to crack. I was just getting started. It dropped at 7:04 a.m. on a Tuesday. I'll never forget the timing because I was pouring cereal when my phone buzzed and Malia groaned. "Is it another PTA email?" Fair. Those women act like Amazon Prime shipping times apply to cupcakes. But it wasn't the PTA. It was a notification from the Chalkboard Diaries, a wildly popular education podcast hosted by a former teacher-turned-journalist named Keisha Grant. Think cereal, but instead of murder, it's systemic injustice in American schools, and trust me, the body count is emotional. The title? EP 47. Paper Cuts and Power Trips the Hidden Bias of Brookridge Academy. I nearly dropped the Cheerios. Malia asked what was wrong, and I just gave her the world's most dangerous smile and said, "Nothing, baby. Go grab your lunch. Mama's got a busy day." By 9 a.m., it had 20,000 downloads. By 10 a.m., my inbox had exploded. The episode laid it all bare, not just the data I provided, but first-hand testimony from 2 of the teachers Mark pushed out. One, a Latina science teacher named Ms. Alvarez, said Mark told her in a performance review that she was too assertive and that students respond better to gentle energy. Which is hilarious considering she was voted student favorite 2 years in a row. Another, a Black male social studies teacher, shared that Mark once said during hiring season, "We need less controversy this year. Let's aim for neutral candidates." Neutral, y'all. As if Blackness was a political stance. Keisha's voice was sharp, clear, but never angry, which somehow made it worse. You could hear the fury under her control. Like me, she knew exactly when to let the silence work harder than words. She even got a hold of archived disciplinary memos and noted how often the word disrespectful was used for girls of color. It was practically a bingo card. That afternoon, the school's Instagram account, usually filled with overly filtered photos of classroom door decorations and inspirational Maya Angelou quotes, turned off its comments. Mark issued a statement through the school website. It was the usual bland damage control, deeply value diversity, committed to learning, taking this opportunity to grow. I'd seen better apologies from toddlers. Meanwhile, one of the moms from the Cool Clique PTA, you know the kind, Kate Spade bags, judgmental eyes, vibes of white wine and generational wealth, texted me. "So sorry about everything. I had no idea it was this bad. You were so brave." I replied with a thumbs up emoji. That's all. because it took years of silent eye rolls at her microaggressions to get here. She doesn't get a front row seat to my fire just because it's burning bright now. By Thursday, the district superintendent released a statement about reviewing Brookridge leadership. By Friday, Mark was on personal leave. They thought I was just mad about a suspension. They didn't realize I was building a guillotine out of their own damn emails. And the blade was coming down. You know how, in high school, there's always that one girl who doesn't say much, but knows everything? That was me. Even back then, I didn't gossip, I collected. Because eventually, knowing the right thing at the right time is more powerful than popularity. So when Principal Ellison took his personal leave, and suddenly every staff email was CCing the assistant principal like she was the one actually running things, spoiler, she always was, I knew it was my time to weaponize silence. Let me tell you something about small school districts. They thrive on whispers. The PTO moms don't need proof, they need vibe. And the vibe? Oh, honey, it was shifting. It started with an anonymous Twitter account. Not mine, of course. Please, I have taste. But a very motivated dad whose son got detention for rolling his eyes at a teacher. He'd been watching the news like the rest of us and messaged me asking if there was anything he could do. So I pointed him to the folder labeled disparities_notes_v final_final_ really this one, PDF, and let him cook. By Wednesday, a Brookridge truth was trending in our city. Anonymous stories poured in. A guidance counselor Mark fired after she tried to implement an anti-bullying program. A janitor who overheard him tell a school board member that parents like Grace Holloway just want attention. Sir. Correct. I want attention for the injustice you're bathing in. Then came the screenshots. That's when things got delicious. A teacher, still employed, sent me a series of Slack messages between staff. Mark had called my public comment at the board meeting emotional theatrics and a well-prepared tantrum. He even compared me to a woke Aaron Brockovich. Reader, I printed that quote on a mug. But here's where it really got fun. Mark had a side hustle. A consulting business he promoted at education conferences. He'd advise other principals on maintaining school climate and minimizing disruptive voices. You know, parents who care too much. Guess what? He used his school email to book those clients. I knew because one of them, a principal from the next town over, forwarded me the entire thread after listening to Keisha Grant's podcast. Oops. I packaged everything up into a pretty PDF titled Conflicts of Interest and Cowards, an informal review of Principal Mark Ellison's side business, and BCC'd every board member, the district HR department, and For Flair, the alumni newsletter of the private college he never shuts up about attending. An hour later, my phone buzzed. It was Keisha. Girl, she said, are you trying to get this man exiled from the education system entirely? Not trying, I said. Executing. She laughed so hard she snorted. By the end of the week, he wasn't just on leave. He was under formal investigation. His consulting site disappeared. His Twitter went private. His LinkedIn lost the Principal of Brookridge Academy line, replaced with Education Professional. Translation, unemployed. But I wasn't done. Because if you want real change, you don't just take down the king. You take his throne. It was one of those fall days that makes basic people pull out boots and order pumpkin spice, everything, and yes, I absolutely had a peace cell in my hand when I decided I was running for the open school board seat. Mark's scandal had torched his credibility, and the district was scrambling to play cleanup. Their answer? Install a bland placeholder candidate. His name was Gary. He wore windbreakers. He said things like, let's not politicize the playground. He was Mark Ellison's buddy. Nope. I filed my candidacy with the city clerk's office that afternoon, smiling like I'd just won an Oscar and knew my ex was watching. To no one's surprise, the The smear campaign started before the ink on my paperwork dried. Gary's friends and Mark's cronies started whispering that I was unstable, combative, and my personal favorite, too emotional to make policy decisions. Sound familiar? They dug up an old Facebook post where I ranted about standardized testing being designed by bored white men with control issues. Tell me I'm wrong. Someone tried to twist it into a racist tirade. I literally had black educators messaging me like, wait, where's the lie though? But Gary? Oh, he was all smiles at forums. His answers were loaded with vague nothings. We want every child to succeed. We support our teachers. We're focused on unity, not division. If buzzwords were ballots, Gary would have won in a landslide. But I had something better. I had receipts. I had rage that had matured into strategy. And I had the moms. Oh yes, the two loud in the front row moms. The brought homemade snacks and opinions moms. The ones who had been patronized, silenced, called hysterical and dramatic every time they raised concerns. They rallied behind me like I was leading them into battle. We printed flyers. We went door to door. We hosted backyard info sessions where I explained how funding gets diverted, how disciplinary policies are enforced unevenly, and how emotional was code for won't sit down and shut up. Then, in the final debate, Gary slipped up. He said, and I quote, "I think Ms. Holloway's intentions are admirable, but we can't let emotion override data." I smiled, pulled out a packet of spreadsheets, color-coded and bound, "Thank you very much," and said, "I am the data." The room went silent. Then someone clapped. Then another. Then it became thunderous. Gary's face looked like he just realized his mic was still hot after calling his boss a jerk. On election night, I didn't throw a party. I watched the returns come in from my living room, barefoot, eating leftover pasta with Malia curled up next to me. I won by 14 points. I became the first Black woman to serve on the Brookridge Academy School Board. And the first order of business I pushed through? A third-party equity audit of every policy Mark Ellison ever touched. He may have vacated the building, but I was coming for his legacy. You don't need to scream to destroy someone. You don't even need to speak their name. You just need to hold up a mirror, let them look, and walk away while the cracks form. I didn't post a single thing about Mark Ellison after the election. Not one Facebook update. Not one triumphant tweet. Not even a passive-aggressive story with just a reminder that karma doesn't forget, quote. I didn't need to, because the town was already talking. And more importantly, so was the industry. While Mark was on personal leave, which everyone knew was code for lawyers are involved, my equity audit revealed that he'd misclassified disciplinary actions to keep the school's record looking clean for donors. In other words, he lied, not dramatically, just enough to smooth over his bigotry with bureaucracy. He was the king of technical racism. He didn't say slurs, he said fit, as in, she's not the right fit for our culture. He didn't yell, he smiled while writing teachers out of the future. He didn't shout people down, he made them doubt their own voices. So I did the one thing his whole career had been protected from. I opened the windows. The audit went public. Every stat, every anomaly, every policy Mark rubber-stamped that disproportionately targeted kids who looked like mine, it all went on the school website in a new transparency and accountability section. With charts, with source links, with receipts. But the coup de grace? A symposium. That's right. I hosted a professional development summit open to teachers and administrators from across the district on equitable discipline and cultural humility in schools. The keynote speaker? One of the teachers Mark pushed out 3 years ago. Now a nationally recognized equity consultant. She opened her talk with, "When someone tells you they're being silenced, listen to how they're saying it. If they whisper, it's because someone taught them loud voices aren't safe. The entire auditorium went quiet. Guess who didn't show up? Mark Ellison. He didn't RSVP. But I knew he'd heard about it. The Whisper Network made sure of that. 2 weeks later, I got an email from a journalist with the subject line, "Off the record?" Apparently, Mark had applied for a job at a private school in a nearby city. She wanted to know if I had any comment about his leadership. I stared at that email for a full minute, then replied, "No comment necessary. His record speaks volumes." She published the piece 2 days later. Headline: A Culture of Silence. Why Mark Ellison's legacy at Brookridge Academy isn't as clean as his resume. The school rescinded their offer. He resurfaced 6 weeks later, teaching one online class for a startup edtech company nobody respected. And even that didn't last. A parent from Brookridge screenshotted the job post and sent it to the podcast's Twitter account. Within a day, the company deleted the announcement and went very, very quiet. Mark went fully offline after that. No LinkedIn. No interviews. No public statements. Me? I was just getting started. Next up, new policies, better support systems, and a new principal search, one I was handpicking the finalists for. Some people called it overkill. I call it balance. The boardroom smelled like fresh paint and old secrets. We'd just renovated the meeting space, new chairs, new tech, same boiling undercurrent of power struggles. Because while I'd won the public fight, the private battle, it was just heating up. See, once I took my seat on the school board, some of the old guard assumed I'd calm down. Be grateful. Play nice. Spoiler alert. I don't do nice. I do results. And that's exactly what they didn't want. Especially Carl Whitman, the board treasurer. A man with a voice like an NPR pledge drive and the spine of a boiled noodle. He kept suggesting we focus on moving forward, which was code for let's bury this mess and never speak of it again. But I didn't come to sweep things under rugs. I came to drag the whole carpet into the street and light it up. So at the quarterly board review, aka though we pretend to evaluate policy, but mostly not a lot meeting, I requested a full line-item discussion of the discretionary funds allocated under Ellison's tenure. Cue pearl clutching. "Grace," Carl said, using that careful, condescending tone that men like him think counts as polite. "Is this really the most productive use of our time? We've already committed to restorative practices moving forward." "I'm sure it will be productive," I replied with a sweet smile. "Especially once we find out why Mark used $12,000 on consulting travel during a fiscal freeze." Dead silence. I slid a folder down the table. Inside? Receipts, invoices, and emails showing that Mark had used school funds to attend his own speaking gigs. He was getting paid to speak on school climate and using our budget to fly there. I'd gone full forensic accountant on his expense reports. Even matched up his travel to his Instagram posts. Pro tip, if you're going to defraud a school, maybe don't hashtag work perks on photos of yourself sipping mojitos in Miami. Carl sputtered. One board member, a retired librarian named Ms. Duvall who'd been side-eyeing me since day one, actually gasped. "We had no idea," she murmured. "Oh, I believe that," I said. "Which is why it's time we start asking, what else have we not been told?" I called for a motion. Initiate a full audit of discretionary funds from the past 5 years. Establish a committee to oversee financial transparency. Require itemized public disclosure of all future board-related spending. Carl voted no. Everyone else voted yes. And me? I just sat there, smiling, while Carl's face turned the color of a sunburned tomato. Afterward, as the board members trickled out, Ms. Duvall stopped at my chair. "I misjudged you," she said softly. "I thought you were angry." "I am," I said, gathering my folder. "I'm just using it better than they expected." She nodded. "That's a gift." Outside the building, I stood in the crisp air, letting the quiet settle over me. This wasn't vengeance anymore. This was legacy reconstruction. And I was just getting started with the foundation. Hiring a new principal is a lot like dating after a toxic relationship. You've got trauma, trust issues, and a deep fear of charming smiles in navy suits. The school board formed a search committee, and I made damn sure I was on it. Carl, let's just move forward. Whitman was not. The community had spoken, and they wanted me to lead the charge. I didn't take that lightly. We got over 70 applicants. Most were fine. Some were fluff. A handful were trying to hide red flags behind flowery language like strong disciplinary framework, translation, I love suspensions. But one name stopped me mid-scroll. Dr. Selena Bishop, former middle school principal, PhD in educational equity, author of a paper titled Punishment versus Protection, Why Black Girls Deserve Better. I scheduled her interview myself, told her to take her time, brought pastries, wore my power lipstick, sat back and watched her dismantle our hiring panel's outdated assumptions with the poise of a surgeon removing rot. Halfway through, someone asked, "How would you handle a student recording an incident of racism in class?" Dr. Bishop didn't even blink. I'd thank her. Reader, I wanted to slow clap. She was unanimous. Unanimous. Even Ms. Duval teared up when casting her vote. When we offered her the job, she said, "You've got a storm here. But I've lived through hurricanes." Then she smiled at me. "You cleared a path. I'll build on it." It was the most validating moment of the entire war. But I wasn't quite done twisting the knife. See, there was one final thread to pull. Something poetic. A gift, if you will. I reached out to the district's professional development director and suggested we start a leadership symposium for incoming principals focused on restorative justice, equity, and inclusive school culture. She loved it. Asked me to help design the curriculum. Guess what we called the keynote series? Emotional Intelligence in Leadership, When Listening Changes Everything. Guess whose former staff were invited to speak? Guess who wasn't invited? Mark Ellison. He wasn't banned. That's not how I operate. But he watched, silently, as teachers he once belittled stood at a podium in his old district and taught others how to undo the damage he built a career on. The day of the first session, I wore all black and sat in the front row. Malia was beside me, in her honor roll hoodie. Dr. Bishop opened the day with a line I'll never forget. The best revenge isn't just removing the problem. It's creating the solution in its place. I glanced down at Malia, who was watching with quiet awe, and realized I hadn't just changed the story for her. I'd rewritten the ending for everyone. It came at 11:07 p.m. on a Wednesday. You know the hour, too late for business, too early for emergencies. Just late enough that you know it's going to be some bullshit. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. But then I saw the preview. Grace. I know you probably don't want to hear from me. But I sat up in bed, the ghost of a smirk already forming. Mark Ellison. The man really typed out a midnight apology, like I was one of his exes from grad school. The message rambled, something about reflection, missteps, and how he'd lost everything. He mentioned a teaching position at a virtual charter program in Idaho, like it was a tragedy and not the universe gently nudging him out of relevance. Then, the kicker. I'd appreciate the chance to speak with you. To learn from this. Maybe help advocate for restorative work together. Together. This man. This worm. This hollow mannequin of a former authority figure wanted to collaborate. I didn't reply. But I did screenshot it. Not for blackmail. For my journal. It's titled Moments I Knew I Won. The next morning, I told no one. I made my coffee. I drove to campus for our new student orientation. And I felt something I hadn't in years. Peace. But the universe? She loves timing. Because that afternoon, I was standing in the auditorium lobby, clipboard in hand, coordinating volunteers, when I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned, expecting a parent. It was him, Mark Ellison. Same crumpled khakis, same faint cologne, same look in his eyes, only now it was a shade more hollow. The confidence was gone, replaced by the soggy resignation of a man who Googled his name and didn't like what he found. He opened his mouth. "Grace, I held up a hand. Didn't raise my voice. Didn't move a muscle. No." He blinked. "No to what?" he asked. "To whatever this is. Whatever you're hoping for. Closure, grace, redemption, collaboration." "No." He looked stunned, like no one had ever told him no without apologizing. "I've changed," he said, almost desperate. I tilted my head. "So have I." He opened his mouth again, but this time, I walked away. I didn't wait for a reply. Didn't offer comfort or softness. Didn't even look back. I had a student ambassador asking where the water bottles were. I had a young girl on stage about to read a poem on belonging. And most importantly, I had a life Mark Ellison no longer had access to. That night, I unblocked his number just long enough to send one message. Redemption isn't something you ask for. It's something you earn. Start somewhere else. Then I blocked him again. Permanently. Because some doors don't need to be slammed shut. They just need to be locked, with the key melted down into a trophy. The boardroom smells different now. Not just because we switched out the fake wood conference table for one crafted by local students, real walnut, smooth, with carved initials on the underside like a secret promise. It smells different because it's ours now. Not just mine. Ours. When I sit down in my chair, board member Grace Holloway, Equity Subcommittee Chair, and the most frequently requested speaker at statewide education summits, I don't think about Mark Ellison anymore. I think about what comes next. The school has changed. Not overnight. Not perfectly. But the shifts are real. Discipline policies have been rewritten with restorative justice at their core. Suspension rates for Black and brown girls have dropped 43%. Teachers who once tiptoed through bureaucracy now walk like they own the damn floor. And Dr. Bishop? Thriving. Her office smells like vanilla and ambition. There's a framed quote on the wall. Malia picked it out. "You tried to bury us. You didn't know we were seeds." Malia's now in 8th grade. She's got a strong sense of justice and an even stronger side eye. She started a student-led equity council, and when the vice principal told her they didn't have funding for it, she looked him dead in the eye and said, "That's funny. My mom finds money for justice every month." I was both mortified and deeply proud. Mostly proud. At our annual board dinner, held in the school gymnasium we once filled with silence, I give the closing speech. No podium. Just me, standing among teachers, students, and parents who know what it's like to be overlooked, talked over, dismissed. I tell them the truth. That they were never too emotional. They were responding to harm that should have never been allowed in the first place. I don't talk about Mark. He's not part of this story anymore. He's a footnote in a book we've already outgrown. Instead, I tell them what I see now. A girl at the center of a room instead of the corner of a detention slip. A mother who didn't burn out, but burned brighter. A table that used to seat power, now rebuilt to share it. Afterward, one of the custodians I'd known for years, Mr. Ramos, claps me on the back and says, "They'll tell this story for years, you know." I smile. They'll tell our story. Because revenge? It's not just about watching the old system crumble. It's about what you build in its place. And this? This is the table I rebuilt. Solid, shared, and set with a seat that no one will ever tell me I don't deserve again.